and parents and virtue signaling and stuff actually brings me into another subject which I don't hear talked about in the media, which I think needs to be talked about. And there is an issue, I think, sometimes with sexuality that gets overlooked when it comes to transgenderism and perhaps relationships with other people. So have you ever, as a psychologist, have you ever heard of, is there a concept of people having a fetish for the other gender and there being a sexual component to it? And does that play in? The reason I'm trying to hit on this is because I think from the postmodernist philosophy, people can start arguing that you can be transgender but also trans-aged and transracial and all these things, and then you be labeled as a bigot if you question that, and then those people can then it starts to get a little shady with younger people mixing with older people. And so is there any kind of sexual risk here going on with people with certain dysphorias or conditions?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we say risk, but there's certainly something going on here that has caused a lot of controversy. And just yesterday on Twitter, I was talking to somebody who was talking about this autogynephilia. Okay, this is what kind of put transgender, on the map a number of years ago. And on one of my podcasts, I spoke with a person who did that. His name is Dr. J. Michael Bailey. Okay, and he was basing his work on Dr. Ray Blanchard, who's in Toronto. A lot of the work on transgender issues come from in Toronto. Okay, Dr. Ken Zucker, James Cantor, Ray Blanchard, Kurt Freund. They were all doing work on this, and these are white cisgender cisgender men. Okay, doing this work. So immediately people are going, you don't know what you're talking about, or there's some people.
Was one of those individuals the man who was let go because he said we should exercise caution?
Yes, Dr. Ken Zucker. And all these false stories came out about him, one in particular. Now I can't talk too much about it. He's because he's filing a suit against CAMH for letting him go. But a lot of people are saying he's the devil. So many people say he saved our lives or he helped us. Okay, and the same thing's been said about Dr. Bailey and others. So I teach about these people. And I had never spoken to them directly. So I spoke to Dr. Bailey for hours on my own podcast. And this is where the controversy came. So what he said was, see, I believe there's at least 3 types of reasons why someone's transgender. Okay? He says there's only 2. There's a taxonomy of 2 types called the homosexual transsexual and the autogynephilic transsexual. Okay? And this is talking about from men transitioning to women. The motives for men transitioning to women. There's that taxonomy. Okay, so the one is saying that simply that they are a gay man. If they were from a young age were very effeminate, and they didn't share typical boy interests, right? And as they got older, sexually speaking, they were into men. Okay, and when they transition into a woman, they are interested in men. Okay, so now they look like a heterosexual woman, but in fact they are a gay man who, for whatever reason, Dr. Bailey was saying it kind of makes it easier to, this is years ago, easier to kind of get by in life. If you're a man and you want to marry another man, it might be difficult. But if you become a woman and you can pass easily, right, then it makes life much easier in many ways. So he's saying that was the one type. But the second type is the far more controversial one. And this is where it turned the world upside down. And this was in his book called The Man Who Would Be Queen, which when it first came out, the transgender community loved it because they're saying, hey, someone's shining a light on our experience, right? They hadn't read the book, right? And afterwards they felt, it's very insulting. And I wouldn't say, I can see why people would be insulted. Some of his passages were pretty blunt, a bit clumsy, I think. Okay, I don't think he thought necessarily how someone who's transgender might feel reading this. Okay, he was just trying to say, look, from my experience, this is what I saw. In speaking to him, I know he had no ill intent. Okay, he's a real live and let live. He's a libertarian. He really is in that regard. Okay, I can't say about politically, but as far as he just wants people to be happy with who they are. Okay, he doesn't judge. All right, so the book might come off as judgmental, but that's not the point. That's not his purpose. Okay, so the point is this: autogynephilic males. Okay, so basically, if that applied to me, I'm a man. Okay, and I have a fetish about female genitalia. Not simply that I love women's vaginas, but I get turned on thinking about what if I had that female genitalia? What if, okay? And then it's so powerful that drives me to transition and have the surgery. So now I've got this vagina. So he said it's a fetish. And so those are 2 types. And a lot of men who did transition or who haven't transitioned but are thinking about it have said, yes, that describes me. I've always sexualized it. I've thought about having a vagina myself, and it really turns me on. And other people say that has nothing to do with my experience. It's simply I was born in the wrong body. How dare you reduce my identity, my being to a fetish? And that caused a lot of controversy. So the fact that it became sexualized, right, that turned a lot of people off. Okay, and it made them very angry. So now whenever someone brings it up, right, and again, I was just talking about this on Twitter just yesterday, they're saying, they're saying that people use this to dismiss them, to call them freaks, to say this and that, to conflate this with cross-dressing. And so, it gets very heated. And so it's very simple just to dismiss it and go, bigot, you're just transphobic, whatever. And it shuts down discussion, right? Where I'd say, look, I've got no judgment on that. If that's what someone's going through, all the power to them, as long as they're not hurting anybody else. Let them find what works for them. Let them find, how can they be happy and fulfilled in life. That's all I care about. Okay, but again, people get their back up because they believe that somehow it's being used to denigrate themselves. Okay, and this happens. This is an extreme example, but this happens across the board. Whether we're talking about, let's say we say that, hey, certain groups, whether it's racial or sexual orientation or gender or sex or anything like that. Okay, if we say we know there are certain phenomena associated with these groups, okay, I say let's talk about what these are, because then we can ask the more important question of why is it?
Right.
Okay, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying if we know certain groups have these proclivities. All right, again, as soon as you bring it up, I understand that people think, okay, racist or sexist or homophobe or whatever. I get that. And in many cases, I think it's true. I think certain people do want to bring up this information in a way because they're trying to, to crush somebody or to make them look bad or, or to ostracize or marginalize them. That does exist. Anyone who pretends it doesn't is a fool, right? But if someone can truly say, that's not my goal, I just want to understand it better so we can help people understand each other better. That's what I want to see, and that's the goal of science. All right? And that's why I've had these video series where, I'm not sure if you saw, I was talking with Dr. James Cantor. He does work with pedophilia. Okay? And when I've been asked to talk about the media, I always have to start off with, anybody who actually does harm a child, who acts on their urges, you're a monster. Okay?
Right.
That's just terrible. But if somebody is born with this condition, okay, or something happened developmentally that caused them now to have this desire for children, right, to have sex with children, and they don't act on it, they're doing everything in their power to resist, why should we condemn them? We should get them help, right? Right? But suddenly the people, now they're calling me, like, oh, yeah, I'm advocating for pedophiles. No, I'm not. I'm advocating for society. That's, we have to understand them. And again, I want to be very clear. If someone has those urges, whether they are a pedophile or born that way, it seems, or whether they're a sex offender, that's for whatever reason, that's what they like to do, right? As soon as you hurt a child that way and you don't get that it's wrong, you're a psychopath. Okay? I can't be any clearer than that. You're a monster, right? But for the people trying to resist it, let's help them. But I'm just throwing this out at you as an example of...
What about in situations where it might not be clear if it's abuse or not abusive? For example, I'm seeing a lot of media reports where couples are deciding to... parents are deciding to transgender, so the mom becomes the father and the father becomes the mom, and then they raise their child gender neutral. I'm concerned that this might not be healthy for the development of the child. I'm not an expert on child development, nor am I a psychologist, so I don't really know. But intuitively, I'm like, I don't think this is healthy for the kids. And I'm a libertarian as well. I'm like, live and let live. But there's a relationship with parents and kids that I'm concerned about. So what would you say as a professional in that scenario?
Yeah, that's where ideology is driving. Okay, I think we'd have to say, wait a second. Evolutionarily speaking, we as a species have developed a certain way. Right. There is a biological mother, there's a biological father. They each have certain traits, right? Children have been raised with them. Of course, there's exceptions. Like you can have a community where the father, doesn't exist. He's hunting. He goes far away, and all the sisters, raise the child. So sure there are these variations, but overall it seems that we're built to be a certain way. So as soon as we start tinkering with this without even knowing the consequence, we're causing some potential damage. So for a parent to pretend, oh yeah, the mother, the father, who plays what role or whatever, no effect, you're being silly, because we do know there are biological differences between children. Boys and girls, for example. We know boys have far more testosterone. We know that girls are going to be more inclined to be more, empathetic or more compassionate and so on. We know that when a boy and a girl, here's a funny thing, for example, if they hear a baby crying, this was a study done years ago, all right? The boys, like the girls were like running around, they play these recordings of the study, okay? The girls are running around trying to find where this crying child is to console the child. The boys, they're like kind of shut down. And so they thought, oh, these cold-hearted kids, they don't care. in reality, their heart rates were going off the charts. Hearing the child crying was causing a reaction in them, okay? Now, the girls were having the same reaction as well, but their response was, let's tend to the child. The boy's response was, don't know what to do, shut down. Okay?
I see.
That's a biological difference. It's not like all these children were socialized to be this way. That's something inherent in us, okay? So there are certain biological mechanisms in us. I mean, we know for a fact, as soon as a baby's born, they're going to respond differently to certain smells. They're going to respond to, if you have a circle with 3 lines, and the lines look like 2 eyes and a mouth, just rudimentary lines, if they're turned in different angles, the child's not looking at it, okay? So there are programs in our brains and our DNA that drive us to be a certain way, right? So if we have them, why wouldn't there be different pathways for boys and girls?
Right.
Okay? To deny it is silly.
It's logical. That's a great segue into probably the biggest point here, which I think is that I think the big issue in our culture right now is that there's a conflict between blank slate theory or socialization theory and everything else, and that's basically pervaded a whole bunch of different areas, include like media, academia.
Right.
But that's the fundamental problem. The idea that the mind is a blank slate that you can just program, or does it have innate characteristics? That's the fundamental thing. Everything else kind of bubbles up from that, right?
Right.
So I know from Jordan Peterson, for example, that academia is completely overrun with this idea. And I know from my own experiences in the media that most journalists in their 20s that come out of academia now think that. So it's reflected in the media. So I want to start talking to professionals about institutions specifically. Like, so for example, the OPA, the Ontario Psychological Association.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then, so that's one organization I want to ask you. And also OISE, which is the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, yes. Which I've heard many anecdotes about these things having issues. So, let's start with the OPA, the Ontario Psychological Association. You've had controversy with them before. Yep. Is there an ideological problem with them as an organization, would you say?
As an organization, not necessarily. The members within the organization, definitely.
Right.
Okay. And the fact is, it's an organization that is run by members. So if enough of those members with these ideologies are on the board of directors, which they are, then it can cause problems. So overall, I don't want to tarnish the OPA. I think it does incredibly good work for its members. Okay. The president especially is working really hard to help society, to help psychologists, mostly in society. Okay. But the fact is, there are elements or factions within the OPA that came right out of OISE, that have this mindset, that think they're doing good, and I'm sure they believe that they're helping others, okay? But the reality is, I don't think some of them, I'm going to be careful here with my wording, okay? But based on my interactions with a number of them, and I interacted with a lot of them when I came to Dr. Peterson's defense back in November of last year, and onward, okay? Based on the emails I got from them, okay, these are trained psychologists. I want to be very clear on this, okay? I have very high standards for psychologists. Right? We are trained in theory, okay, to be able to look at the evidence, right, to tolerate, okay, the discomfort we might feel in reading something that maybe we don't like. Maybe it doesn't jibe with how we want to see ourselves or the world or whatever else, but we're able to look at it and say, okay, was the study done properly? Proper sampling, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we should be able to do that and say, okay, does this seem valid? Okay, where are the holes? That's what we're trained to do. I'm telling you right now, I know for a fact there are a number of my colleagues who can't do that. Okay, you say 1 or 2 words and they get triggered just like anybody else will. I had exchanges with them that, I swear, if you didn't know that these were 2 psychologists talking, it was like it was a Twitter battle. Okay,
this is very concerning.
It is
extremely concerning.
It is, because these are the people who are supposed to help others. These are the ones that
the psychologists.
School boards come to. Yeah, school boards, organizations, depending on what the field is, they come to us and say, like, hey, we need to run a program, or we need to help people, or we need to, what's the best way to help children, deal with sexual identity, etc. They come to them. And if they're not basing their answers on science, but rather on ideology or false beliefs or hopes or whatever, that's doing a disservice to the public. And there are those people, again, ensconced within OPA. And by and large, statistically speaking, a lot of them come from OISE. Okay, and that's just a fact. I mean, and I know people who teach at OISE. I know people who've gone through OISE, and there are many excellent professors. There are many great students who've come from there, but there is an ideology there that's being promoted. And when I see young, professionals come up, and here's the thing: it's disheartening to me when I get calls back channels saying, "Please knock it off." We're getting members saying they're going to quit. We're getting members who are saying they're getting triggered just by seeing a subject header. Okay.
I understand that due to the nature of the mind, it's impossible to be completely objective about anything. But you know, the idea is to approximate towards as best you can be. And I would think that psychologists would have to be trained to be some of the best at doing that. So why are so many of your peers not able to do that? Are the standards too low for them, or how did they become psychologists without having this skill?
But it wouldn't. I don't know if the standards are too low, but it's not tested for. It's just it's presumed that that's going to happen throughout our training. You know, maybe they're just not dealing with the difficult issues, or they're they're buying into this mindset that is not helpful. It's basically a victimization mindset. It's believing that so many people are vulnerable, they're fragile. You have to treat them with kid gloves. And look, I'm not one of these you know, Dr. Phil types of just, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, son. No, I understand. Okay, this is where we have to be careful. This is where nuance comes in. I understand that many people have certain vulnerabilities, whether it's because of, you know, something that they were born with, whether it's because of their personal upbringing, whether it's because of the color of their skin, sexual orientation, whatever. People have these limitations. But the fact is, I also know that many people with the same limitations, given the proper environment, are able to overcome that. And the most important thing that they need to be told is, you can do it, right? That's a mindset that you need to be able to, and it's not just saying, hey, you can do it just like everybody else. It's saying, I know you have these limitations. Let's help you overcome them. You may have to work harder here, here, here. You need a bit of help there. Do that, but then encourage them, empower them, get them to be able to have a belief in themselves, to be able to go out there and you know, do the best for themselves. That's not what's being promoted. What's being promoted is, you poor baby. Again, I'm oversimplifying here, but this is the kind of the sentiment we're seeing. Right. You poor baby. There's a lot of wolves out there. You're just a little sheep. You're a helpless sheep. I've got the staff. I'm going to protect you from all these sheep, okay? And it's not really encouraging people to you know, fight on their own, to gain that sense of self-agency, to be able to feel, I can do it. That's not being promoted. And when I see my colleagues with the same mindset, not only that they're passing this on to their, you know, their clients, but they themselves feel this way. They themselves feel that they are the sheep. That's wrong. We are not supposed to be the sheep. Not saying we're supposed to be the wolves. We're supposed to be, I don't know, I've lost the metaphor here, okay? You want to encourage people to be whatever's not a sheep, okay? Right, you know? Right. But again, it's doing so, recognizing the vulnerabilities, limitations, whatever else that a person has. And that's where this black and white thinking comes in, where people are going, oh, why are people, you know, why are people so concerned about the gay situation? Doesn't everyone accept gays now? Isn't it normal? Why? No, the fact is, if you're gay, or like I work with many people who've lived their whole lives living a lie. Right? They get married, they have children, they try to fit in with society, culture, family, whatever is you know, being imposed on them, that they have to live a certain way. It kills them. It tears them apart when they're living a lie, when they feel, I'm such a deficient human being, I'm such an immoral monster that I can't even open up to my own family, right? So I am not unsympathetic to these situations. I understand them, I recognize them, but I'm also saying, I'm going to help you try to elevate yourself above that.
That's very interesting. So what I notice about you is I'm sure the accusation of hatred and all that's been hurled at you. Yeah. Clearly, you're not motivated by hate, and I'm myself a pretty libertarian kind of guy. I live and let live. But so when I look at things, society from the top down, I think, what would be the best way for everyone to be free and happy? Because I don't, you know, I'm a big defender of Western culture. I like what Western culture is, but I also appreciate that, you know, culture can be oppressive, and it can, like, those people that have to live a lie their whole life, that's not great either, right? So now I think the free speech issue is really where how this all came together, right? So I'm against compelled speech because at the end of the day, it's my responsibility to gauge who I'm talking to and how I want to engage with them. Because I'm a nice person, usually I would just use somebody's preferred pronoun if they asked me to.
Yeah, me too.
But you know, sometimes if I see someone and I think that they're perhaps a scam artist or have an ulterior motive, and that I can recognize that, then I don't want to and use that language to play their game or whatever, then I'm not going to. Yeah. So as a psychologist, though, do you think that the speech codes are necessary for the mental health of certain people, and that, or like, what is the compassionate yet well-informed way to approach people that are begging for preferred pronouns?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of compelled speech for the reason that Dr. Peterson, Dr. Sad, and others have you know, mentioned. So I don't think we should force people to use preferred pronouns. It's become such a hot issue. I do believe that having laws that prevent people from being discriminated against is correct. Okay, that I think we have to. You know, there's just a civilized society does that. Okay, but using someone's pronoun, and look, I will. It doesn't matter if the person wants me to call them they. If it's a man who wants me to call them, or a physical man who wants me to call her, or whatever, no problem. These made-up pronouns, je, je, and stuff, I'm not going to use because they're not real. I see that as part of an agenda.
That's at that point it seems pretty obvious that when you have 40 pronouns and they're just like
there's more, but yeah,
right,
exactly,
like
ever growing, right? So you know, and as Dr. Peterson has said, where does it leave us? You know, where do we end? So I'm not a fan of those made-up words. Okay, but as far as what's the right thing to do, we already have laws in place. Okay, and I think if we have to be specific in saying you can't discriminate against someone who's transgender, and discrimination meaning, you know, about not giving them a job, not renting to them or something like that. Okay, I can understand that, but you know, the pronoun issue, I don't really see that as, you know, I mean, I can see how it. I understand how someone refusing to call someone like that and say, no, you're a man, you're a man, you're a man, when someone saying, no, I'm a woman, okay? I can see how that can be hurtful.
Right.
Right? So I get that. I get the intent, but the execution is very poor. So I think these pronouns, no. If someone can demonstrably show that they are being discriminated against, okay? They are being actually either physically or, this is where it gets tricky when we talk about psychologically or emotionally hurt, because if I say biological sex does exist, there will be a tiny percent of the population going, you hurt me, you're discriminating against me, and so on. So it's very difficult to say where does the psychological harm come, okay? So I think that is one of those things where if we have, like, we all know what it looks like, so to speak, or we used to. In the old days, we used to know what bullying looked like. We used to know what discrimination looked like. Today, however, these ideologues have destroyed any sense of these words. It's like calling words violence.
Ironically, I would say that they are bullies themselves.
Oh, they're extreme bullies.
I think that was how I got drawn into this about a year ago, was noticing that these people were going around bullying everyone and then saying they're bullies and we're the virtuous ones.
And look, I said this in one of my videos, and people thought I was trying to, you know, to somehow, you know, I don't know, hurt or denigrate certain people, and I'm not. I'm just saying this is a pattern I've seen. And I said in my video, and I gave like a 5-minute caveat, so I'll do the 2-second caveat, okay? I work with many people with borderline personality or borderline traits, okay? And the fact is, there is a phenomenon among people with borderline personality where they are the aggressor, or they push somebody, not maliciously, not intentionally. It's just through their own trauma and, you know, and just their own inability to deal with their own emotions and fear, et cetera, et cetera. So they inadvertently push the other person to the point where that person lashes out at them, and then they become the victim.
Right.
Okay. I've seen that happen, what you just described, so many times. And they, you know, the thing is, I work with a borderline patient and I can show them, look, hey, this is the trait that you, or this is your pattern. This is what you're doing. I know you're not doing it on purpose, but it's maladaptive. It's pushing people away. It's hurting you, it's hurting them, et cetera, et cetera. They can acknowledge it. I have not found one person on the left, one bully who's admitted saying, you know what, actually there is a hypocrisy here. Okay, you know, no one's been able to admit that. Again, they double down in their self-righteousness. And, you know, I'm going to bring this back to the whole free speech thing, all right? And I have to be careful here because I don't want, you know, look, she's got her own demons, she's got her own history, she's got her own motives. This Christine Thornton, or Christine Elizabeth, who helped shut this event down previously at Ryerson, okay? She's made it very clear that she's going to try to shut down this next event on November 11th that we're holding the same talk, okay? You know, and so she's made it clear. Okay, this is very important. People have to know this. I've got all the evidence. I've put it out there on Twitter. I've done it in interviews. I've shown the journalists, you know, that I reached out to her. When you want to find out, when people ask me, how do we deal with these problems that are going on in society? You deal with it on a one-to-one level. Okay, this has been shown for everything. Same with racism, you know, like where people go, oh, these, you know, this certain group of people. Well, you bring people from that group in a healthy way, introduce them to the people who hate them. Right? And they go, oh, they're just human beings, right? You can overcome prejudice, bigotry, everything, hate, by having a face-to-face contact. That's how humans are. We're social animals, okay? As long as it's done in the right way. If I come face-to-face with you and you stab me in the heart, I'm not going to like you too much, okay? But if it's done properly, right? So I did that. I reached out to her. I was blunt in my reaching out, but I was very clear, and I invited her to the to be on the panel. Okay, I tried very hard. I gave her my background. I told her about my, you know, my Jewish background, about my gay brother, my black brother, my gay sister, my Asian wife, my biracial children. I told her all these things that I think you might have the wrong impression of me. She totally ignored it. And then when I called her out on that, because these journalists were reporting, were interviewing her, and she's talking about us fascists and the things that we've said that are so reprehensible and so on. I basically told those journalists, hey, by the way, I actually reached out to her. Okay, here you go, and she denied it.
That you reached out to her?
She denied it. Yeah, she said, stop lying, you nasty human. She also wrote, said, for the record, the only panelist who reached out to me doxed me. Okay, and at first, and I spent days saying to her, show me the evidence that I doxed you, since I'm the only one who reached out to you. Okay, and she was denying. That's what she's saying, you nasty human. I showed her the evidence, and she was, oh, isn't Photoshop wonderful, or something like that, implying that I photoshopped, this evidence that I reached out to her. That's odious. That's disgusting. And she's outright lying like that. And this is the thing. Too many people on the left, and this is very important, whether it's Antifa, okay, or anyone else, they get away with it. They are not held to the same
I've seen it. I know. I see it regularly. It's crazy. When the comedy show in support of your event that was shut down when the locks were destroyed, people were cheering this, and I was thinking, you can't just wreck private property, and you can't shut down comedy shows, and this is the left doing this. The irony of this is baffling. And this is why I think that this is all relevant, because this is a real issue here. Like, you can't you can't just walk down the street in a free society anymore. But I'll give you an example. Like, I work a Joe job, I made some money, and then I went and I bought a hat, and December, it was a Rebel Media hat, not a good hat, but the point is, Rebel Media is a legal company, they're a conservative company, but I'm not even a huge fan of Rebel Media, but I wore the hat because I wanted to trigger. The point is, I walked down the street, and I was assaulted from behind by some Antifa people, and they ran off. And I have some of this. I have many witnesses. Lots of my colleagues have witnessed this. They've seen I've got some stuff on my YouTube channel. The point is, I could give you a dozen examples of where I've been like assaulted or robbed, basically, and then I'll confront these and then I'll confront these left wing. Like, usually it's Antifa people that assault me, like wearing black, and then run off, but then the progressive allies are still standing there, and I'll talk to them, and they'll talk to me about how the patriarchy is oppressing them, this, and then I'll say, well, that was a clear example of property right, like, of you stealing my property, and I hadn't done anything to you, and they literally will just say something like, shut the fuck up, and I'm like, this is, now I don't know if free speech matters, because you're not even having a dialogue, you are a zombie, basically. They just, like, pumping out, spewing out ideology, and that's why I'm so concerned when I talk to you. You talk about some of your peers and as psychologists that have the emotional maturity, it sounds like, of these same protesters, and I see it in academia, and now I'm hearing it's in OISE, it's in the psychological associations, everywhere, and it's this. I call it radical leftism. It could be just boiled down to blank slate theory, if you really want to simplify, but it's a cultural and social force that's probably dominant right now in this city. And so I have one final question for you, and it's more of just a personal question for you. But I'm very inspired when I see people that have achieved a lot, and then they put their neck out to stand up for something, like Jordan Peterson or yourself or Gad Saad, because I know it takes a lot to become a doctor or to become an intellectual, and most of the time your peers don't stick up for you. And the general idea is, well, they do agree with me, but they've spent so much of their life to get where they are that they can't just throw it away. But, I'm sympathetic to that, but I'm just wired differently. The reason I'm not working in the mainstream media is because I'm a horrible careerist, because I have way too much integrity, and this is why I'm doing this. Because to me, it is, I guess, a moral issue. I never really say that out loud, or just call it like a passion for me, but it matters. So what I'm asking you is, like, how much moral obligation do you think your peers have to come out the way that you do, for example? Because I think they do have a moral obligation too.
I think you do. Now, you never have an obligation to put yourself at physical risk. Okay, that's something you choose to do. Okay, but if you're a student trying to climb up and you're trying to establish a career, I don't encourage people to put their careers on the line, or the potential careers on the line. I did. Okay, all the way through. I've been well known for having a big voice. It's in my DNA. Okay, but once you've reached that point, right? If you can conduct yourself in a way that you're untouchable, that really the only thing that you risk is the scorn of your colleagues. If that's the only real risk, then you have every moral obligation to, if you're into, like in my field, for example, or in any field where you've attained a position, I think you do have that moral obligation, because we're trying to help other people to get to a similar place. Not necessarily to become a psychologist, but to be in a society that is fair, that is just, that encourages people to be able to grow as people and as a society, right? And there are certain jobs that kind of lead toward that, like psychology. So any of my colleagues, I had many colleagues who back channeled, so said, I really support you, but I'm afraid, right? Fine. I'm not going to condemn them for not speaking out. They have their own reasons. Okay. And there are some people who did speak out. And the sad thing is, here's the sad thing. You know what's really sad? The fact that when someone like myself, who's nobody really, okay, but I do speak out, and when I've come to talks and people come up to me, okay, they see me on the street and they say thank you, right? That I'm an anomaly, right? That's what's really sad. I should be the norm. What I'm doing isn't special. What I'm doing should be expected. You've come to a position where I am. You should be able to use your voice, use your platform, and speak out so that other people will feel empowered to do the same thing. And that's it. But they're afraid of being labeled as hateful, et cetera, et cetera. And look, I don't want to sound like a Jordan, Peterson, sycophant, but his latest appearance on Joe Rogan, episode 1006 with Brett Weinstein.
Great episode.
Toward the end, like I think it was the last 5 or 6 minutes, he spoke about what he's doing. He spoke about, because everyone says, well, he's with the right wings and everything.
Right.
No, he's not. But he's reaching out to them to say, look, I know you don't like the left, and there's a good reason not to like the far left or the extreme left, the radical left. I get that, he's saying. But there's alternatives. You don't have to go all the way to the right. Here's the way. Become your own person. Don't fall into identity politics. And this is what all my videos, if you look at them, really are trying to say. It's like, look, we're social animals. We belong to certain groups. Yes, okay, we identify with these groups, but that shouldn't be our identity. We should feel that there's some kind of connection, right? But first and foremost, be your own self. Straighten yourself out. Understand who you are. Check your morals. Check your motives, right? And if you've got that in place, then you can go out and try to help others. All these radical lefts, so many of them, they've got none of that. They're living in a world of internal chaos or external chaos, right? This is their way of deluding themselves into thinking that they're doing something good. No, they're not. They're doing no good. They really are not. Even though they might be somewhere in their mind some good motives, but in reality they're not doing good. They're doing more harm than good, and they are truly pushing so many people away from them. So many people used to be left, they've abandoned the ship, and I just wish they will stick in the center rather than going, to the right. And I say this, I'm not right, I'm not left. I mean, I'm who I am, and certain ideas on the right make sense to me. Certain ideas on the left, I know Jordan Peterson doesn't like the term compassion. I'm all about compassion, but true healthy compassion, not this paternalistic or maternalistic, oppressive compassion, but more of just saying, hey, you're a human being. I value you as a human being. You got a problem or whatever, it's like that. I get it. I understand it. And that's, and let's work around that. That's to me what compassion is, right? They're also patronizing and just, yeah.
And they justify violence very quickly, surprisingly quickly.
Yes, and again, and they're getting away with it. And it's sad that now finally in the States, right, I think it was Nancy Pelosi, of all people, she finally came out and condemned Antifa. And some people have said this. Most people on the right will condemn the Nazis, will condemn the white supremacists, right? How many people on the left will condemn Antifa?
Exactly. Very good point. Well, I think that's a good point to wrap it up here. But, I really appreciate you taking the time to clarify some of these things with you. And I think that final point was very well said. So I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you very much. For doing what you're doing as well. I really appreciate, again, you're putting your neck on the line as well, physically as well. And we need more people like you to step up and, you and your organization to step up and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care.
Yeah.